Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jamie O.
And I'm Paul Barber. Our top stories. China says conditions for its long-term growth remain unchanged on the eve of the country's top advisory body's annual gathering.
China's manufacturing sector is a focus of the two sessions as activity hits a 3-month high in February.
Crypto rallies after President Trump announces 5 cryptocurrencies he'd like to be included in a new strategic reserve.
Shares in the Chinese bubble tea company Misha jump on its market debut.
When are we going to be able to get behind the wheel of one of these here in Europe?
And Barcelona hosts tomorrow's Tech Today. We're in Spain for the Mobile World Congress.
China says conditions for its long-term growth remain unchanged, while acknowledging some serious economic challenges ahead.
The country's top advisory body is unveiling its agenda on the eve of the annual Two Sessions gathering, which begins in Beijing. The government says China's economy will continue to be driven by what it calls innovation-led economic growth.
Our correspondent Jen Copestake is in Beijing.
CPPCC is the country's top political advisory body. It plays a critical role in advising on economic policy, and that's balancing short-term challenges with long-term strategic goals. We've been hearing from the CPPCC spokesperson Liu Jieyi at a press conference ahead of tomorrow's opening of the session of the CPPCC. Mr. Liu outlined that China's economic resilience was happening amid global uncertainties, and this was particularly thanks to initiatives like the new productive innovation forces. Those are models prioritizing innovation-driven growth. Let's have a listen to what he said.
We are aware that profound and complex changes are taking place in the domestic and external environments, and the Chinese economy faces some difficulties and challenges. Consumer demand remains insufficient, and the risk in some areas still awaits resolution. But more importantly, we must see that the Chinese economy enjoys solid foundations, multiple advantages, strong resilience, and great potential. The underlying conditions and basic trend of long-term growth remain unchanged.
Now that was Liu Jieyi speaking about the CPPCC's confidence in China's economic foundations and giving his assurances for continuation of China's long-term economic growth trajectory despite the current challenges. Now, one area he highlighted was managing insufficient consumer demand. He said that China was going to have to dig deep in its own toolbox to encourage consumption, as it can't control what happens in the rest of the world. That was a nod, of course, to the current situation in the US. He also emphasized growth in technological innovation and advanced manufacturing. He referred multiple times to China's new productive forces. This includes leadership by China in lighthouse factories. Now, these factories, there are 189 in the world, 79 of them are in China, are so called because they have high standards of advanced manufacturing technologies and sustainable manufacturing standards. We had the chance to visit one in Guangzhou. That was the GAC Ion electric vehicle manufacturing facility, which was, I have to say, extremely impressive to see. So this framework for the new productive forces is also going to prioritize technological breakthroughs in China, of which we've seen plenty in the past weeks, including advances in artificial intelligence, also green energy. And Mr. Liu told the press conference that indeed China is leading in wind, solar energy, and the production of new energy vehicles.
What else is on the agenda?
There's quite a lot on the agenda, so there's several key areas that the CPPCC is going to focus on in this year's session. One is certainly going to be environmental sustainability, achieving China's green goals. We heard from Mr. Liu that the air quality has improved significantly in China. He highlighted that 87% of days now have good air quality readings. So finding a way to continue that improvement while increasing industrial output will certainly be on the agenda. As we mentioned, tech development, the development of artificial intelligence, which is on everybody's mind here. We heard from a company that we visited in Shenzhen called Engine AI, who have created a humanoid robot that's selling for about $15,000 US, that they want to incorporate within the next 3 years general artificial intelligence into their humanoid robots so that they can become sort of a companion to people. So that will lead to discussions on the development of ethical governance frameworks for artificial intelligence and emerging technologies. We're also expecting to hear how China will lay out the groundwork, the pathway forward for the encouragement of a positive business environment for these private tech companies in the years ahead. And finally, revitalizing rural areas, addressing disparities in rural and urban incomes will be on the agenda, and how China will continue to modernize in the agricultural sector. So there's a lot for us to talk about.
A lot to talk about. That was Jen Copestake reporting from Beijing. Well, of course, March marks the most important political season in China as two major annual meetings in Beijing get underway. It's called the Two Sessions. The gatherings last a week. The two sessions are closely watched by international markets as China's lawmakers set diplomatic, economic and trade policy, as well as goals for the environment and other strategic areas. The National People's Congress, or NPC, is China's legislature. It's made up of nearly 3,000 NPC delegates or deputies. They speak for the public, present their concerns, submit bills to the government and pass laws. The Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, or CPPCC, is China's top political advisory body. It's made up of 2,000 members from all walks of life, although the majority are from business. They gather to debate ideas and proposals.
Well, China's manufacturing sector is a key focus of this two sessions, as new data shows factory activity hit a 3-month high in February. The Caixin Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index, or PMI, came in at 50.8 last month. That's up from 50.1 in January. A reading above 50 signals expansion, while below 50 reflects contraction.
Well, our correspondent Li Jianhua is following events from here in London. Jianhua, this upbeat manufacturing PMI data, what's behind that?
Well, Paul, several factors are contributing to it. The Caixin Manufacturing PMI, which is based on a survey of private industrial enterprises in China, is slightly higher than the official manufacturing PMI released on Saturday, which stood at about 50.2. But both indicate China's manufacturing is slowly recovering despite headwinds, and something the Chinese authorities will talk about extensively during the two sessions this week. So the first reason, I think, that is the manufacturers are front-running the U.S. tariffs. Trump imposed 10% tariffs on Chinese products starting February, less than a month into his presidency, and he is vowing to levy another 10% starting tomorrow, Tuesday. So stronger external demand for Chinese goods could be imported stockpiling in anticipation of more tariffs in the future. Another reason could be stimulus policies from the end of 2024. We talked about that at length last year, remember, and to stabilize China's economy so that its economy could reach the 5% GDP growth target for this year. And Chinese New Year could also be part of the reason, as this year's Chinese Lunar New Year fell in January, which means people go back to work earlier in February, which led to this rebound too.
Well, you mentioned tariffs. China doesn't exist in a vacuum. Trump's tariffs loom large. Can China's ambitions really be sustained?
And actually, I don't know. And China's export-driven economy is highly sensitive to global trade fluctuations. So uncertainty still remains, as we don't know if Donald Trump is going to impose more tariffs on Chinese products or how that impacts China's manufacturing overall. But we can find some clues from Donald Trump's first term as U.S. president. So the trade war between China and the United States started in mid-2018. And by December 2018, China's PMI dropped to 49.5, which means contraction. The trade war escalated in 2019. The PMI stayed below 50 for 8 months of 2019 of that year. In 2020, the Phase 1 trade deal was signed, in which China promised to buy about $200 billion worth of American products. This led to a slight PMI recovery and then entered the dual circulation strategy introduced by Chinese President Xi Jinping in May 2020, which means internal circulation and external circulation. Internal circulation means boosting consumption domestically. External circulation means expanding global trade to reduce China's reliance on the U.S. market and strengthening its ties with the European Union, ASEAN and the Belt and Road participating countries. But still, the United States is still the third largest trading partner of China at this point. We'll see what comes out of the two sessions this week.
We will. Jianhua, thank you so much for setting the scene for us. Li Jianhua.
Well, Dr. Yan Liang is Professor of Economics at Wilmette University in Portland, Oregon. Professor, lovely to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. Trump's tariffs are going to loom large over this two sessions, aren't they?
Yes, you're right, Jimmy. Thank you for the invitation. So I think the external environment remains to be uncertain and also precarious. I think that the policymakers coming into this meeting would have that in their minds. And as the report talked about, since 2020, this dual circulation strategy has been put in place. And we saw this from the last year's Politburo meeting and also the Central Economic Work Conference, that boosting domestic demand becomes a top policy priority. So I think we'll hear a lot in this current MPC about how to stimulate consumption demand, how to improve investment efficiencies. So I think those policies, especially from the fiscal side, is going to help to bolster domestic demand to cope with this kinds of external uncertainties.
Okay, well, that's the broad brush stuff. Give me some hard examples as to what that might look like.
Right. So I think, the details is still, of course, unclear. But at this point, I think it's very likely the government is going to announce a higher deficit to GDP ratio. Some, reports have put it to about 4%, which will increase the fiscal spending by another 1.3 trillion yuan. But that's not it. There will be more issuance of the long duration treasury bonds to help finance some of the infrastructure investments and help to funnel some funds to the local governments. There will be also an increase in the local government bond issuance. Last year, the quota was 3.9 trillion. This year, we're looking at, somewhere between 4 and 4.5 trillion. So all these are going to help the government to improve and increase the spending to help to bolster the economy. So a lot of the spending is going to help to finance the so-called two major investments, but also trade-in program that was launched last year that was very successful to help to boost the retail sales. Some of these bond issuance finance would also help to recapitalize banks and also finance some other spending.
Some sectors of China's economy continue to be in trouble, to experience pressure. How do you anticipate those concerns being addressed in this two sessions?
Right. So I think on the one hand, boosting domestic demand, especially consumption demand and also efficient investment, will help to resolve some of these problems. I think what you mentioned is there is the weak demand, especially weak consumer sentiment that continue to drag down the retail sales and also consumption in China. But that said, I think last year consumption still contributes about 44.5% of the GDP growth, coupled with investment and government spending. That really helped to drive economic growth last year. So I think this year there will be more efforts to bolster domestic demand. On the other hand, I think the government also has issued some policy measures to, in a way, help to regulate some of the competitions. We know the competition in China is really fierce, right? That there is some sort of so-called involution. So I think some kind of policy measures to guide companies, right, from too much of the cutthroat price competition would also be helpful to boost industrial profits.
Well, looking ahead, really, let's just for a moment look at the here and now. How would you assess the current state of China's economy?
Well, I think we're seeing a lot of optimistic signs. On the one hand, we're seeing the consumer sentiment has been lifting. When you look at the spring festival travel, this year's travel was 5.9% higher than last year, and the spending is 7% higher than last year. And you look at Nezha number 2, right? It rating, close to 2 billion box office revenues around the world, and most of it comes from domestic market. And you look at consumer confidence index, that reading was also improved in the later part of 2024. So we're seeing some evidence that consumer sentiment is improving, and the housing market, I think that has been also in some ways stabilizing. When you look at, for example, the major cities, their new home prices have been stabilizing, and actually in some of the major cities it has increased. The second-hand home price continued to fall in the February. for the 100 cities. But that has been narrowing. The decline of the price has been decelerating 7 months in a row. And we're also seeing some real estate developers getting more finance. They're able to, get some restructuring and also recapitalization, and they're starting to buy land at a premium. So I think there are signs that the housing market is stabilizing eventually. So I think all of these will help to boost domestic investment and consumption demand, not to mention the technological breakthroughs like DeepSeek and also Unitree's robots. I think all of this will help to drive more technological innovations, but also more investment in the stock markets. And so I think all of these will help to boost the economy going forward.
Professor, good to see you, and thanks so much for joining us. Dr. Yan Lian, Professor of Economics, talking to us there at University of Portland in Oregon.
Thank you.
You're watching CGTN, still ahead. Chinese bubble tea giant Mishua's shares rise 40% on their debut. It's Hong Kong's biggest listing of the year so far.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans, grey rhinos, and unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us. And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
You might think you are better informed in an information age. The fact is, people are more often misled by misinformation. You might think every voice is heard in a digital world. The fact is, many nations and peoples are still underrepresented. And data poverty shuts out many. We at CGTN are committed to transcending the information gap and the digital divide. CGTN, bridging nations and civilizations. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. Crypto prices have rallied after President Trump announced the 5 cryptocurrencies he'd like to be included in a new strategic reserve. He says it will help make the US the crypto capital of the world. Our correspondent Mitch McCann joins us now from New York. So, Mitch, Bitcoin up almost 20% from last week's lows. That's a big jump.
Certainly is. Good morning from New York, Paul. That's right. While it is down slightly this morning, Bitcoin has really rallied since we spoke about this last week when its value had dropped significantly. And the reason for this is, as you mentioned, that Donald Trump over the weekend posted online that he's planning to create this national crypto reserve, suggesting 5 tokens, and 3 of them will be lesser known to the general public than the first 2. Now, the first 2 well-established tokens that Donald Trump has suggested for this reserve are Bitcoin and Ethereum, and the lesser-known ones are XRP, Solana and Cardano. Mr. Trump wrote on his app Truth Social over the weekend, a US crypto reserve will elevate this critical industry after years of corrupt attacks by the Biden administration. And he went on to say, I will make sure the United States is the crypto capital of the world. And the idea behind this, from Donald Trump's perspective, is that as stock stockpile of cryptocurrency would be worth more to taxpayers when the price rises, and that would be valuable to have in reserve here in the US. But there's another view, that crypto is a risky asset when the United States should be more focused on paying down its debt instead, which is currently sitting at around $36 trillion US. Now, David Sachs, he is the venture capitalist that Donald Trump has chosen as his crypto czar. He said on X over the weekend there'll be a White House crypto summit this coming Friday, the 7th of March, with chief executives and investors from the crypto industry going to be among the attendees. So this is the latest from Donald Trump in terms of trying to boost the global standing for the United States in terms of cryptocurrency.
And Mitch, from crypto to chips, we're learning that TSMC CEO will meet Donald Trump.
Yeah, that's right. It's been reported this morning that C.C. Wei, the chief executive of the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, is set to meet Donald Trump today in Washington to discuss investment plans the company has in the United States. In November, just been a couple of months ago, the U.S. government finalized a $6.6 billion government subsidy for the company's U.S. operation for semiconductor production in Phoenix, Arizona. Now, it's been reported this morning by the Wall Street Journal and others that the company could be announcing today, at the earliest, a plan to invest $100 billion in chip manufacturing plants in the US over the next 4 years. Now, this would be welcome news, of course, to Donald Trump, who has really made an effort to get US manufacturing happening, well, manufacturing of chips happening domestically rather than in Asian nations, which is predominantly the case currently.
All right, Mitch, good to see you. Thank you very much for that. That's Mitch McCann joining us from New York.
Now, it's not so well known outside Asia, but China's Mixue is bigger than Starbucks. Excitement for the bubble tea company has been frothing over. Investors flock to buy shares in the beverage on its market debut in Hong Kong. Our correspondent Anne Cheng reports.
China's bubble tea and drinks giant Mixue Group surged on its trading debut in Hong Kong. The stock closed up 43.2% from its listing price on a volume of 16.05 million shares and a turnover of over $552 million US. This is one of Hong Kong's most successful IPOs in recent months. Mixue had raised $444 million US in its IPO, with 17 million shares sold in the deal at 202.5 Hong Kong dollars each. Now, according to public filings, Mixue's IPO was oversubscribed by 5,258 times more than the available shares on offer, and this makes it one of Hong Kong's most popular IPOs. Unlike traditional drinks companies, Mixue relies on a franchise model, with almost all of its revenue generated from goods and equipment that are sold to franchisees, and this model is supported by a vertically integrated supply chain. The low prices that it can offer is a big appeal to consumers. This IPO comes just weeks after competitor Guming, a milk tea brand, made its trading debut last month, with shares currently up about 12%. I spoke to an expert, Hao Hong from Grow Investment Group, who says that this year Hong Kong's IPO will warm up again as the market trend is changing, and that there will be more interest in IPO participation, especially in the consumer and tech sectors. Meanwhile, another expert from Natixis, Gary Ng, says that Mixue's performance shows a better sentiment in Hong Kong's IPO market. Although he believes challenges remain in the Chinese economy, he says that Mixue is in a sweet spot, tapping into the consumer shift towards better price-to-value products. Whether this optimism spills over to other consumer sectors, he adds, will depend on the magnitude of government subsidies in the short run and if households feel that there's better income growth and wealth effects down the road. Anne Cheng, CGTN, Hong Kong.
Fiona Sincotta is an analyst at the financial services company City Index.
This IPO was over 5,000 times oversubscribed. We also saw that the share price jumped by 40% on its first day of trading. So that really just reflects the level of interest, demand and enthusiasm there was towards the stock. And I think, that comes from a variety of reasons. This was a very high profile brand that we're talking here. It's China's largest bubble tea chain. And I think not only are we talking about the size of the recognition of this brand, also it comes at a time when the consumer recovery in China feels like it might be just turning a corner. And then as well as all that, it's the IPO market. That is, after sort of several years of drought and quietness, we are sort of turning a corner, and it feels like we're on the brink of a revival in the Hong Kong IPO market.
And it's a really interesting company, isn't it, Michui? Just to give people a sense of just how big it is in China, there are 45,000 bubble tea stores that Michui has across the country. That's compared to 40,000 for Starbucks. And for McDonald's, it's 43,000, so even more than McDonald's. They have this franchise-based model, don't they? Has that been a big part of helping them become so big?
Yes, I think, that's a key part of the business model that was really helped them penetrate deep into China's sort of second and third tier cities. And that's really helped drive this expansion, means it's become a really recognizable name, a strong brand in an industry which, let's not forget, is fiercely competitive. So having that sort of that penetration, having that brand recognition, staying core to its values as well. It's very much kept prices low, dismissing that urge to sort of, chase margins higher and increase prices. And so I think combining those factors together has made this a brand and a company that has really the potential to perform very well.
And in terms of the competition's IPOs, rivals like Baicha, Baidao and Guming haven't done so well, have they?
Timing here is very key. I mean, not only have we talked about how strong that brand is, but also the timing here as the IPO market in Hong Kong really feels like it's turning a corner. I think 2025 is expected to be a very strong year as far as IPOs are concerned. There are a couple of big names lined up.
And talk a little bit more, if you would, about that, about the sentiment in Hong Kong on the IPO market. What do you think will be the highlights coming up?
Catel is the next one that we're going to be watching very closely. I mean, as far as as expectations are concerned, the sort of gains from public IPOs are expected to double in 2025. Broadly, I'm speaking about not just Catel here, but more broadly, to 22 billion this year. So, that's a really big increase that we're expecting to see, and it really does bring this market back to life.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, war and treasure. European defence shares soar as leaders pledge to raise spending to support Ukraine.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos and unicorn companies. Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us. And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Paul Barber. Our top stories. China says conditions for its long-term growth remain unchanged on the eve of the country's top advisory body's annual gathering.
Our other headlines, China's manufacturing sector is a focus of the two sessions as activity hits a 3-month high in February.
And shares in the Chinese bubble tea firm Michui jump on its market's debut.
At least one person has died and several others have been injured after a car drove into a crowd of people in the German city of Mannheim. The police say an operation is now underway in the city centre.
Our correspondent Natalie Carney is in Munich for us now. So, Natalie, what more do we know at this point?
Well, it happened on Monday, which is Rose Monday here in Germany, a day that a lot of people celebrate the upcoming Carnival festival. In fact, a whole week of celebrations are planned across the country, but that is likely to change due to these recent events. Many in Mannheim were at the Mannheim Carnival market, and then around 12:15 local time, just after lunch, a black SUV was said to have driven into the crowds nearby. And what we are hearing, too, police have just confirmed 2 people have been killed, with many others injured. We're also hearing from the Baden-Württemberg, the state in which Mannheim is located, the Interior Minister, Thomas Strobel, saying that the perpetrator who was arrested at the scene is currently in the hospital, having some injuries attended to. He is a 40-year-old German living in Rhineland-Pfalz, or Rhineland-Palatinate, another state north of Baden-Württemberg. There still is no clear motive as to why the incident took place. However, some media is speculating that he might have had some psychological concerns prior to this event. As I've mentioned, here in Munich, for instance, Carnival festivities have been cancelled in the main market square, Marienplatz, due to an incident that occurred here just 2.5 weeks ago, when another car plowed into a group of demonstrators, killing a mother and her 2-year-old child, and again injuring dozens of people. And then, of course, over the Christmas period, at a Christmas market in the city of Magdeburg, another car drove into that area, killing 6 people, with more than 300 people injured. So this is a situation that the government, the new government that's looking to be formed here in Germany, will definitely have to attend to. And again, as I've mentioned, many of the celebrations surrounding Carnival may be postponed, may be cancelled due to this latest incident.
Natalie Carney, thank you very much indeed for that.
At least 8 people have been injured in a Russian drone attack on a building in Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv. The authorities say the strike triggered a fire which spread to apartments on the top floor.
Meanwhile, in Russia, a fire broke out at an oil refinery in the city of Ufa, 1,500 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. Officials say it was caused by a technical issue.
UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer says intense negotiations are underway for a Russia-Ukraine peace deal and that a number of options are on the table.
Starmer hosted Western leaders in London on Sunday, where he said the group agreed on a clear strategy, which will see the UK, France and its allies working closely with Ukraine on a plan to stop the fighting. The UK Defence Minister will travel to the United States this week for talks with his counterpart.
Let's talk to our correspondent Ross Cullen in Paris. Ross, preparations for a peace deal or some kind of peace deal clearly stepping up.
Yeah, Jamie, one of the key things on this point is the pace of these negotiations. Just within the last week, we've had Emmanuel Macron in Washington, Keir Starmer there, Volodymyr Zelensky there, the major summit in London that took place yesterday. And then today we are seeing discussions by MPs. There are, in fact, simultaneous debates going on. The French National Assembly are holding a debate on Ukraine and the geopolitical situation. And we are seeing that statement also taking place in a debate happening in the British Parliament as well. Just in the last few minutes, the Prime Minister Keir Starmer saying that Britain will play a leading role in peace for Ukraine if necessary, and together with others putting boots on the ground and planes in the air, he said that I feel strongly that the future of Ukraine is essential for our own security. We are really seeing a lot of action, a lot of discussion when it comes to the European allies potentially feeling they need to play catch up after being cut out of the original US-Russia discussions that took place 2 weeks ago in Saudi Arabia. They have shown just how warmly they have been embracing Volodymyr Zelensky. Very different optics, very different behaviour when it comes to looking back at Friday's disastrous news conference and the meeting between the Vice President J.D. Vance, the President Donald Trump and their Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky. Very different optics in Sunday, warmly embraced, lots of hugging and backslapping, showing that they are standing full square behind the Ukrainian leader, not just in the overall summit, but also the behind-the-scenes discussions to try to get a potential truce in the air, in the sea and energy infrastructure, something that have been floated by Emmanuel Macron in comments made to the French media on his return from that London summit. So we are seeing now a lot of discussions about this peace plan that the United Kingdom, France and Ukraine would like to present to the United States, and the next key destination for those leaders is going to be Brussels this Thursday for an extraordinary European Council.
Ross, thank you for that. Our correspondent Ross Cullen in Paris.
So how is all that going down in America and Russia? Our correspondent Nick Harper is in Washington for us now. So, Nick, the Kremlin saying that the Trump-Zelensky meeting, that disastrous meeting, just highlights how hard it is going to be to reach a deal.
That's right, Paul. Yeah, these comments coming from the Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov, and he did acknowledge that it is going to be a tough road ahead. He said there is a long way to go because a lot of damage has been done. But he also said that he was hopeful that there could be some sort of agreement between all the leaders. He said it could be quite quick and successful, but only if Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin maintained what he referred to as their political will. But I think it's also worth noting how the Kremlin is viewing all of this, and it's certainly viewing it as a win for them. Throughout the war, we've seen Russia trying to really drive that wedge between the United States and its European allies. What we saw on Friday, that blow-up in the Oval Office between Donald Trump and President Zelensky, that created a very large wedge between the US and Europe, and it happened really without any intervention from Russia itself. And I think that's why we're seeing Peskov also saying that the new administration is rapidly changing all foreign policy configurations and noting that this largely coincides with our vision. Now, you have to keep in mind that for the US and for Russia, it could mean, if they're working more closely together, they could come to a peace agreement. But of course, at what cost and at what price for Ukraine? That's the big fear for Ukraine itself, but also for Europe, that there might be very unfavourable terms overall for Kiev.
And Nick, the United Nations has expressed concern about a shift in direction by the United States.
Yeah, we've seen those comments coming from Volker Turk, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. He was speaking earlier in Geneva, making really a case that there has been this significant shift here in US policy and pointing to some of those changes that we've seen during the last 6 weeks or so. He said that he was deeply worried about the fundamental shift in direction. Now, he didn't mention Donald Trump by name, but he did reference many of the things that have changed with this new US administration. He said policies intended to protect people from discrimination are now labelled as discriminatory, referring there to the diversity, equity, inclusion, all of those programs that the new US government has dismantled, also referring to the USAID programs, the international development around the world that has been put on pause, billions taken out of all of that. Also taking a swipe at Elon Musk, who has done much of the job cutting here through those government programs, saying that there was a growing influence of unelected tech oligarchs. Now, Donald Trump, of course, has long viewed the UN with disdain. He's kept it at arm's length. His America First policy very much in stark contrast to the multilateralism of the UN. So not surprising that we're hearing this type of backlash from the UN High Commissioner. But it does, I think, underscore this very dramatic shift we're currently seeing here in the way that the United States deals with the rest of the world. Paul?
Many thanks for that, Nick. Nick Harper reporting from Washington.
UK and European defence shares have risen to near record highs following that summit in London where leaders endorsed support for Ukraine and pledged to raise defence spending. Our correspondent Will Denslow is in Brussels. Will, a truly remarkable rally in defence stocks.
Jamie, that's absolutely right. A huge rally indeed across the board, across major European capitals. Looking at the UK BAE, the largest arms manufacturer, their shares up around 15%, 15% or so for Thales as well, the French arms manufacturer. And if we head over to Germany, well, more of the same there. Rheinmetall, their shares up around 13.5%. And what we're seeing really is the strong rallies off the back of strong rhetoric from a number of European leaders. Of course, in recent days, we've heard from UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer his pledge to increase defence spending from 2.3% of GDP annually on defence up to 2.5% by 2027. That, of course, will be welcome news for defence industrial companies, and much of the same rhetoric we've heard from French President Emmanuel Macron calling on Europe to boost defence spending to upwards of 3%. This, of course, all welcome news for the Trump administration, who have called on European members of NATO to boost defence spending upwards of 5%. We've also heard from European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, who is urging member states to rearm, saying that she wants to turn Ukraine into a steel porcupine. You mentioned that we've heard recently in the bulletin from colleagues about Thursday's emergency summit here in Brussels on the topic of defence spending. We can expect more details on those defence plans to come out then.
And Eurozone inflation data is just out. What does it tell us?
Yeah, absolutely right. Well, we've cut what has been several months of inflation ticking up ever so slightly here in Europe. It has bucked that trend for February, but less than analysts were expecting. It was 2.5% annualised inflation in January. That's now down to 2.4%, but shy of the 2.3% than many analysts were expecting. Now, if we look deeper into the figures, core inflation, so we strip out things like energy and food prices, well, core inflation ticked down to 2.6% from 2.7%, but there are still major issues when it comes to the underlying numbers. Services, for example, that remains robustly high, well below the gauges and the metrics that the European Central Bank want to see. What this all means for the ECB, well, on March 6th, so just in a couple of days' time, analysts still widely expect policymakers to cut interest rates again, but there are major questions about what this means for the ECB going further if inflation doesn't soon start to get on track towards their benchmark 2% figure. Big question marks about whether they have to slow the pace of those rate hikes later in the year.
Will, thanks for that. Our correspondent Will Denslow in Brussels.
Now, it's one of the world's biggest tech fairs, showcasing what we'll no doubt be buying soon. The Mobile World Congress has opened in Barcelona.
Spain's King and Prime Minister were among the first visitors. Our correspondent Ken Brown reports.
The Mobile World Congress is one of big tech's biggest stages, and Xiaomi unveiled its latest headline product. The Xiaomi SU7 Ultra, an electric supercar which, according to the company, has a better performance than the Porsche Taycan. Going from 0 to 100 in 1.9 seconds, that's faster than a Formula One car for around $65,000. But the question is, when are we going to be able to get behind the wheel of one of these here in Europe? We asked Xiaomi President Lu Weibing.
Everyone is asking me, when will Xiaomi be available overseas, and when can I buy a Xiaomi car in Europe? I find this very interesting because Europe is originally the birthplace of automobiles. My current plan is that in 2027 we can bring Xiaomi cars to the world.
Xiaomi is betting big on the Internet of Things, using the power of AI to connect everything. So soon you will control your car, turn on the heating at home, program your dishwasher, and even let your fridge order the food when it's empty, all controlled from a single app. We also had a chance to see the latest laptop concepts from Lenovo. This is Lenovo's first ever outward folding laptop. You don't want to break it, but there you are. And then, if you want to close it up, works as a tablet. This is the new rollable ThinkBook. Watch what it does. 3 seconds, it recognizes your hand. Want double the screen? Up it goes. Pretty cool. Lenovo, like other tech titans, is braced for US President Donald Trump's tariffs, saying its laptops will be 10% more expensive for the consumer as a direct result. Beyond the attention-grabbing gadgets, the Mobile World Congress is also a tech forum and feels more important than ever in this moment of great political and technological change. Talks are ongoing about how we keep ourselves safe from AGI, or artificial general intelligence, that some experts say could soon surpass human intelligence. How quantum computing and 6G will change the future, and who is going to win the race to AGI with the current frenzy of investment. We'll be trying to answer those questions over the next few days.
Ken, who else have you been speaking to there in Barcelona?
Yes, Paul, we'll be speaking to a lot of interesting people and to some robots too. As you can see behind me, this little guy from Invalon. We're looking at a moment when hardware and software are really coming together, underpinned by artificial intelligence. We've been hearing experts talk about how important the mobile sector is to the economy. $11 trillion by 2030. That's around 8% of the global economy. And right now, artificial intelligence is top of everyone's minds. It's the thing that underpins all of this technology. Everyone from X to Alibaba are creating supercomputers to train language models. We've already seen the results of that with things like ChatGPT and Grok from XAI, DeepSeek, for example. Is still moving around here behind me, but all of those things, imagine those in one of these robots that will help us in the future to be our nannies and teachers and house cleaners and do all of those things. That's the race that's on right now, and it's an artificial intelligence race, really, where, as we know, the United States have imposed some sanctions on China to try and slow them down. But someone we talked to today thinks that that is an opportunity. We spoke to Longsys, one of the top 5 chip makers in China. Here's what we heard.
So Longsys, as a 26 years enterprise of the semiconductor memory technology brand, we have invested a lot, continue to invest a lot on R&D and the production manufacturing side in the past years. So we're ready to enhance this huge opportunity with our technology leading products.
Well, Ken, he's still behind you. It looks like you've made a new friend there. What other fun technologies have you seen on show?
Yes, I mean, that's the great thing about the Mobile World Congress. You see everything from phones, the latest gadgets like the tablets and the laptops and the wearables like the watches and the smart rings that help you, that tell you all about your health and all of that, all the way to electric cars like we saw earlier with we've just walked past a flying car here in this exhibit, and there's just so much more. Some really niche technologies like contact lenses that can help people to correct color blindness. So absolutely amazing things going on. As you can see behind me here, we have a robot who's actually lovely to meet you. Humans, robots, we can all get along, Paul and Jamie.
It's very reassuring, I have to say. I wasn't sure what his intent was there behind you. Looks a little bit menacing, but he seems friendly. Thank you very much, Ken. Ken Brown in Barcelona.
I think we should urgently move on, frankly. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. The world's fastest high-speed train undergoes extensive testing in China ahead of its commercial rollout.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
Unprecedented scenes that we saw.
The clean-up operation is now well and truly underway.
Parts of southern Europe remain in a state of emergency.
Context gives meaning. People make history.
Far more than 1,000 people have come here today.
But authorities are still on high alert.
So now we've actually become the border on this road.
A complex world demands a comprehensive view.
But with the cleanup efforts more or less under control,
the economic impact is bound to ripple across the country.
There's plastic pollution everywhere.
Because the world today matters for your world tomorrow.
This is the living area of the crew.
The focus is firmly on future technologies.
Well, this is something completely different.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Today, China makes 2 out of every 3 of the world's electric vehicles.
The arguments about whether the future is electric are basically non-existent anymore.
What seemed like a blink of an eye, things changed.
The Chinese, they have a 30% cost competitive edge in their sourcing compared to ours.
We must defend ourselves against unfair practices.
We do oppose tariffs. We don't think that's the right measure.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. Ursula von der Leyen says that she wants to give struggling European car makers breathing space by allowing them extra time to meet emission reduction targets without facing fines. The President of the European Commission says the targets will remain the same, but car makers will have 3 years to comply rather than 1. The European Union has prioritised tackling climate change and agreed to phase out sales of new combustion engine vehicles by 2035.
Well, let's stay with cars. Why are Chinese EV makers so confident about their edge in the global market? We've been to Leapmotor's factory in China to see how battery manufacturing gives them a cost advantage and what all that means for European competitors.
This car is packed with features, a lot of safety features, technology features, as you'd probably expect from a Chinese car manufacturer. They're hoping that the European market will love all of these different features, but it is kind of complicated to get your head around it first. They reassure us that it's going to become intuitive.
We headed to China. Just a few hours southwest of Shanghai is Leapmotor's production center.
These are the finished batteries going into the car.
Yes.
So we see how many of these go into the car? Just one?
No, there are 4 big modules and 1 small module in one car.
Batteries are not just the core technology of an electric car, but on average 40% of its cost. So how you make them and how efficiently has a big effect on the final price of a vehicle. We saw how Leapmotor buys individual cells and combines them into batteries. That allows it to create its own electronic architecture, the foundation of an electric vehicle. And the batteries have just meters to travel to the assembly line next door, turning out 1,000 vehicles a day.
目前我们这条线呢是我们的最终线，然后像我们左右侧的这个加注机呢在进行最终的一个液体加注，加注完成之后呢会进行我们的一些电检的一个检测，最终呢相当于整车已经全部的合格的装配下线了。
The Chinese, they have a 30% cost competitive edge in their sourcing compared to ours, which means if I compare the cost of our EVs to the cost of the Chinese EVs when they get out of their plant, they are 30% lower.
Well, that was a little taster of our documentary, Shocking the System, Why China is Winning the EV Race. And you can see the programme in full on Sunday at 16:30 GMT here on CGTN, or just visit the website, cgtn.com.
Now from cars to trains, the world's fastest high-speed train is undergoing extensive testing in China ahead of its commercial rollout. Our correspondent Dai Kai-yi was invited on board for a preview.
Meet the CR450, China's latest high-speed train model that's set to redefine how we think about rail travel.
The cabin here is quieter with more space to rest. I've been told that despite the faster speeds, noise is down by 2 decibels. The seats in business class can swivel 300 degrees. It's luxury at 400 kilometers an hour.
We started planning the CR450 back in 2018. It took 3 years to nail down the top technical specifications, and we kicked off the project officially in 2021.
Pushing boundaries was key to building this train. Designers say they had to step out of their comfort zone, rethinking old standards and blending them with cutting-edge technology to unlock new possibilities.
You don't usually get to see a high-speed train from this angle. Here, under the train, are the new materials like carbon fiber composites and magnesium alloys. Every little detail here to make the train lighter and more aerodynamic.
By using innovative materials and designs, the CR450 reduces drag by 22% and lightens the train's overall weight by 10%. Not only does this reduce the amount of energy required to operate the train, but it also cuts down the impact on the environment.
To achieve a top speed of 400 kilometers per hour, we had to increase the traction power. To further reduce energy consumption and improve efficiency, we also introduced the use of permanent magnet traction motors. We also introduced new noise-reducing structures and materials, which could be applied to other train models in the future.
This train marks yet another milestone in China's pursuit of high-speed rail innovation and is set to bring more Chinese know-how and expertise to the global rail design industry.
Once the CR450 becomes operational, it'll further shrink the distance between cities. The lessons learned from this model will further drive the next generation of rail travel, setting the stage for even faster, smarter, and greener trains. 戴凯 CGTN 北京。
The Chinese electric car maker XPeng delivered more than 30,000 cars for the fourth straight month in February. The startup says it expects its new models to capitalize on the brand's mass market appeal and extend the delivery momentum. China's car market is increasingly competitive as different brands offer reduced prices and launch vehicles with updated tech.
Prada is reportedly closing in on a $1.6 billion deal to buy Versace. The Italian luxury group, which owns labels including Jimmy Choo and Michael Kors, could finalise the tie-up with Versace's owners, Capri Holdings, this month. Talks on the plan have been ongoing for some time, with multiple buyers interested in acquiring the elite fashion label.
The UK's data watchdog has opened an investigation into TikTok's use of children's personal information. The regulator says it's examining whether the video sharing app's data collection practices could lead to young people experiencing harm. TikTok says it's committed to ensuring a positive experience for its young users.
Well, Anora stole the show at the Oscars, taking 5 awards, including Best Director, Best Actress for star Mikey Madison, and Best Picture.
All of the dreamers and the young filmmakers out there, tell the stories you want to tell. Tell the stories that move you. I promise you, you will never regret it.
Anora tells the story of a sex worker who marries a Russian oligarch's son. The Independence movie had a budget of just $6 million, and director Sean Baker made history, becoming the first person to win 4 Oscars for the same film.
And the Oscar goes to Adrian Brody.
Adrian Brody claimed the Best Actor prize for his role in The Brutalist. The film tells the story of the immigrant experience in post-war America. It was Brody's second Oscar after winning the same award in 2003. In his acceptance speech, he called for a happier, healthier and more inclusive world.
And Wicked won Best Costume Design and Best Production Design. Its star Ariana Grande missed out on the Best Supporting Actress award, but she had one of the most memorable moments of the night. Opening the Oscars with a performance of Somewhere Over the Rainbow from the 1939 classic The Wizard of Oz, of which Wicked is the prequel. She was joined by the film's co-star Cynthia Erivo for the hit Defying Gravity. The pair will be reunited for Wicked Part 2 later this year.
And that's it for Global Business Europe. Thank you for watching.
Coming up next on CGTN Africa Live, but we'll see you again tomorrow, same time, same place. From all of the team in London, goodbye.
Goodbye.